Which of the following best describes the system of government in Nigeria between 1922 and 1923? Mind you, 1953. Nigeria began practicing federalism, true federalism in 1954. So before 1954, it was about the central legislative body making laws for the whole country and how that governmental powers were coalesced, were fused, were concentrated in the hands of the central government. So between 1922 and 1953, Nigeria was operating what you could call a unitary system, but by virtue of the Oliver Lytton Constitution of 1954, true federalism was adopted in Nigeria. Now to the next question. Nigeria's first ruler to function as both president and head of state is dash. The answer is Nnamdi Azikiwe. He was not an executive president. An executive president must be elected by the people. He was appointed as president. And as president, he was also head of state. So it was still about the same office. Office of the president is also the head of state. The office of the executive president is both head of state and head of government. But as president and head of state, another person was the head of government, Abubakar Tafawa Balewa. So the correct answer here is Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe. Now to the next question. Nigeria's first ruler to function as both ceremonial head and nominal head as an indigene is dash. Between 1960 and 1963, Nigeria practiced what you could call monarchical system of government coupled with parliamentary system. So we had an indigene as prime minister, Tafawa Balewa, while the head of state was the Queen of England. But the Queen of England was represented by an indigene, Nnamdi Azikiwe. But in 1963, by virtue of the 1963 Republican Constitution, Nnamdi Azikiwe became the first indigene to be the ceremonial and nominal head of Nigeria. So the correct answer here is Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe. Now to the next question. The 1964 federal election was conducted under the chairmanship of Dash. Now, 1964 federal election was conducted under the leadership of Dr. Eyo Esua. That's option D. Now to the next question. A Greek philosopher, Socrates, described man as a political animal. True or false? That is false, because it was a Greek philosopher known as Aristotle that described man as a political animal. Now to the next question. The right to use force to compel, coerce, and command obedience is power. True or false? The answer is false. Why is it false? Whenever we hear about rights to do something, rights are given by the law, by the Constitution. So when there is a right given for something to be carried out, it is according to law. Will force be used? Yes. But is it guaranteed by the law or the Constitution? Yes. So the rights, legal rights or moral rights, or legal right or moral right to use force is known as what? Authority, and not power. So the answer here is false. Now to the next question. Court orders which have the force of law are known as dash. The answer is writs or injunctions. So the correct answer here is B, writs or injunctions. Now to the next question. Voters can also be regarded as dash. Voters can be regarded as electorate and electors. Now to the next question. The concept that is most associated with separation of powers is dash. Separation of powers was propounded by a French philosopher known as Charles de Montesquieu, popularly regarded as Baron de Montesquieu. He propounded separation of powers alongside another brother or sister concept known as checks and balances. So the concept that is associated with separation of powers is checks and balances. Now to the next question. Hugo Grotius described the state of nature as short, solitary, and brutish. True or false? It was Thomas Hobbes, a British philosopher, who wrote on social contracts, where he said that if there is no law or agency to regulate the affairs of the people, the state will degenerate into a primitive society where life was short, nasty, solitary, brutish, and poor. So it was not Hugo Grotius. Hugo Grotius was a Greek philosopher. It was Thomas Hobbes, a British philosopher. So the answer here is false. Before we take the next question, I would like to remind you guys that you should hit the notification bell and also do well to subscribe to our YouTube channel at The Rock Tutors. The first scientist to write on political culture was Dash. Now, the answer here is a French philosopher known as Alexis de Tocqueville. Alexis de Tocqueville. He was the first person to write on political culture. But if a question comes out like this, that who is the modern exponent or writer on political culture? That one will be Gabriel Almond. Gabriel Almond wrote on it within the past 60, 70 years, but Alexis de Tocqueville wrote on it some 150, 140 years ago. So the correct answer here is Alexis de Tocqueville. Now to the next question. The two elements of politics are dash. They are definitely conflict and order. Those are the elements of politics. Now to the next question. The state primarily undertakes political socialization through the dash. Now, let us reinterpret this question. How will the state teach citizens about politics? Because political socialization is the process of teaching people about what? Politics. Now, can you see the state? No. The agent of the state is what? The government. So how will the state, through the government, teach citizens about politics? Definitely it has to be through the curriculum, which has been imbued and ingrained in the educational system. Albeit that no students can pass through secondary school without offering civic education, without offering social studies. So through curriculum, through schools, or through educational what? Institutions. Now to the next question. Basic agents through which the masses are made to be familiar with socio-political norms is dash. This 74th question is quite similar with the 73rd question. Because how can the masses be made familiar with socio-political norms? That is still political socialization. Political socialization refers to a lifelong process of teaching, of learning, of transmitting, and of acquiring what? Political beliefs, knowledge, political norms, political skills, political orientations, political ideologies, political values, political affections. Are you getting now? What does this knowledge help citizens to do? It makes them to know their rights and duties and helps them to participate better in politics. So how will the states, or which agents will the state use to help the masses to know about political norms? That is the school, option A. Now to the next question. The power of a state chief law officer to discontinue any ongoing case is dash. Now this place is not specifying whether the country or the subnational entity known as state, like Lagos State or Ekiti State. But whether at the federal level, the chief law officer is the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice. While at the subnational level, the chief law officer is the Attorney General of the State and Commissioner for Justice. The principle and the power of that chief law officer to discontinue any ongoing case is known as nolle prosequi, discontinuation of an ongoing case. So the correct answer here is B. Now to the next question. The lack of disinterestedness in politics is dash. Double negative. Lack of disinterestedness. Now, disinterestedness in politics. When we say citizens are disinterested in politics, it means they are not interested in politics. But when there is now the lack of disinterestedness. So we are going to use lack to nullify disinterestedness. It will now be the interest of people in politics is dash political participation. But if the question were to be like this, lack of interest in politics is dash, the answer will be political apathy. But the lack of disinterestedness. People are supposed to be disinterested, but there is lack of that disinterestedness, meaning that they are now interested. That is political participation. Now to the next question. What election is to democracy, dash is to legitimacy, acceptance. Election is crucial to determining democracy. Acceptance or support or acceptability is crucial to determining legitimacy. Now to the next question. The first scientist to write on political culture was, the correct answer is Alexis de Tocqueville. a French philosopher, statesman, diplomat, and writer. Now to the next question. The philosopher associated with political culture in modern times is Gabriel Almond. Now to the next question. And international roles and deviance limit a state's autonomy. It cannot. Deviance has to do with, disobedience. It cannot limit a state's autonomy or sovereignty. What can limit a state's sovereignty that is similar to this? It has to be international laws, international organizations. A membership of an international organization can limit a country's sovereignty. Before we read the 81st question, I would like to remind you viewers to kindly hit the notification bell and do well to subscribe to our YouTube channel at The Rock Tutors. A common feature between a nation and a state is that nation is a group of people with same culture but without independence. State is a group of people who are independent, they have a territory, and they are under a government. So what is peculiar to both a nation and a state? It is a group of people. Do they both have independence? No. Do they both have same culture? No. What do they both share? People, humans, or demography? Now to the next question. The major feature of a rigid constitution is that a rigid constitution is difficult to amend. And if you don't want to say it is rigid to amend, you say it requires difficult, strenuous, cumbersome, and encumbering procedures for amendment. A says it can only be amended by the electorate. No. Can only be amended by the judiciary? No. It requires a simple majority? No. It requires the vote of members of the executive? No. The correct answer is E. Requires 2/3 majority for amendment, which is usually difficult to secure. Now to the next question. The aim of a prayer group is to dash. A. Blackmail the government? No. Execute government policy? It is not their duty. They only exist to influence government policies for the benefit of their members. So the correct answer is C. Influence the government for the benefit of their members. Now to the next question. The responsibility of demarcating the country into constituencies is performed by dash. This process is called delimitation, which is otherwise known as delineation. Delimitation or delineation. And it is carried out by the Electoral Commission of a country. So the correct answer is B, Electoral Commission. Now to the next question. The ability to influence the behavior of others by coercion is dash. The question looks as if it should have an answer called authority, but it is power. Why? Because of coercion. And there is nothing like legal right or moral right there. Had it been the ability to use legal rights or the legal right to influence through coercion, it could have been authority. But here, the answer is what? Power. It won't be legitimacy. Legitimacy has to do with the acceptance of government. It won't be sovereignty. Sovereignty has to do with the power of a state. It won't be supremacy. That's not even part of the context that we are speaking of. So the correct answer here is C, power. Now to the next question. The involvement of qualified persons in electing their representatives is political dash. The answer is political participation. It is a process of taking part in politics through voting, through joining a political party, through campaigns, through rallies, through sponsoring candidates, and so on and so forth. So the correct answer here is D, political participation. Now to the next. Which of the following is not an importance of constitution? A, it defines the powers of the organs of government. Constitution will do that so that there won't be friction. It defines it. B, facilitates military intervention. That's out of it. That will be the answer. A constitution does not ensure that military will come into politics. Constitution arranges the military to just be in charge of securing territorial integrity. So the odd one here is facilitate military intervention. Now to the next. The chairman of the State Civil Service Commission is usually appointed by the dash. The chairman of the State Civil Service Commission is appointed by the governor, while at the federal level, he is appointed by the executive president. So the correct answer here is C, executive governor. Now to the next question. Public corporations are established through dash. Public corporations are established through Act of Parliament, but we don't have Act of Parliament here. So what can suffice for Act of Parliament is parliamentary statutes. Laws made by act of parliament are known as statutory laws. So D is the correct answer here. Now to the next question. Formation and implementation of government policies lies on the dash. The correct answer here is civil servants, because we have two organs under the civil service. We have the administrative class and the executive class. The administrative class will formulate government policies, while the executive class will implement government policies. Can you now see that it belies and lies on the civil service to formulate and implement government policies? So the correct answer here is A. Before we take the 91st question, I would like to remind you subscribers to hit the notification bell and do well to subscribe and follow us on our YouTube page at The Rock Tutors. And please do not forget, shortly, our paid for live classes, where you will have access to live contents, will soon be unveiled. Watch out and stay tuned. Neutrality of civil servants implies that they dash. When we say civil servants should be neutral, it means that they should not engage in partisan politics. They are supposed to be loyal to the governments of the day. They shouldn't engage in partisan politics. Should they vote? They will vote. It is a civic right. But can they join political parties and openly join politics? No. So they should not be involved in partisan politics. E, that's the correct answer. Now to the next question. A constitution is classified as unwritten if it dash. When we say unwritten, it is not that it is not written down. It means that it is not written down in one single book. Can it be written in different books? Yes. In fact, some might be written, while some might not be written. They might be customs and conventions, things that people they've agreed on over time that this is the way to do things. So while all the contents of a written constitution are couched in a single document, an unwritten constitution is not written down in a single book. So some are written and some are conventions. So the correct answer here is it is not contained in a single document. The correct answer is D. Now to the next question. The local government authority typically describes the practice of dash of powers in a federal democracy under federalism. How powers are transferred to local government authorities is called devolution of powers. And how powers are divided between federal and state, that one is decentralization. Are you getting now? So, but devolution is about transferring power to local authorities, but with supervision. So the correct answer here is D, devolution of powers. Now to the next question. The coup d'etat that ousted the Second Republic in Nigeria was in dash. Coup d'etat has to do with forceful overthrow of power by soldiers. So when soldiers hijack political power from civilians, it is a coup d'etat. And when soldiers hijack political power from fellow soldiers, that is a counter coup. The Second Republic was between 79 to 83. And what ended the Second Republic was a coup d'etat. So the correct answer here is 1983. E. Now to the next question. The ministerial appointments made by Nigerian presidents are subject to the approval of the dash. Appointments of ambassadors, appointments of ministers are subject to the approval and ratification of the legislature. But which arm of the legislature? The Senate. So it must be approved by the Senate. So here we have House of Representatives, no. National Council of State, no. National Executive Council, no. Senate parliamentarians, that's the correct answer. Now to the next question. Indirect rule was successful in northern Nigeria because of the dash. It was because in the northern part of Nigeria, there was an existing administrative system, existing monarchical system, existing taxation system that favored the adoption of indirect rule. So it was about existing centralized traditional administration. And why did it fail in the eastern part of Nigeria then? In the Igbo land, it was because there was no existing traditional system. There were no monarchs per se. Igbo system was acephalous. It was decentralized. It was fragmented. So the correct answer here is B. Now to the next question. The adoption of a bicameral legislature, it is to guarantee adequate representation. When we have just one chamber, the entire part of the country might not be properly, captured and represented. But when it is bicameral, at the upper house, all states will be equal, all regions will be equal. But at the lower house, factors like population and so on and so forth can be taken into consideration, and there can be adequate representation of all parts of the country. So the correct answer here is guarantee adequate representation. Now to the next question. The acceptance of a political administration explains that is about the concept of legitimacy as expanded by a German sociologist called Max Weber, where he described legitimacy as the acceptance that citizens give to their leaders, the support that citizens give to their leaders, the goodwill that leaders enjoy from citizens. So when a political administration is accepted by the people, we refer to that as legitimacy. So the correct answer is C. Now to the next question. An instrument that expresses and realizes the will of a state is dash. The answer is government, which is B, because can we see a state? No. But the machinery, the agent, the instrument, the institution used by a state to ensure law and order, to promote good life and happiness, and to ensure that the state is well governed is dash. The answer is what? Government. B. Now to the next question. An electoral process where seats are allocated in relation to the total number of votes is dash. The answer is proportional system. Under proportional system, legislative seats are distributed on percentile or percentage basis, whereby legislative seats are divided based on the percentage number of votes gathered and garnered by political parties in the general election. So the correct answer here is proportional representation.